Good evening. It's Friday night. It's just gone 6 o'clock for the 1 week. Purely and simply because I'm taking a wee bit of a break, getting some sun on my back, on my front, on the baldy head as well. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. Tonight we are talking on the Friday night football pitch with Dennis Newell as always and Scott Hartley, our Washington guest. We are talking women's football again. We'll be revisiting the row between Alan Brazil, Shabana Hearn. We'll maybe even discuss it in some greater detail, what the women's game means in relation to the men's game, and talking about female footballers as role models for ladies. We'll also be looking back on the cup shocks at the weekend. Dennis had some interesting things to text me last week regards Rangers, so we'll be discussing that and Liverpool. We'll be asking which of the two is the bigger cup shocks. I think Scott and Dennis will probably be in agreement with that one. And we will be having our discussion this week about the amount of non-British players at British clubs. Something that I noticed during the week in terms of how many foreign players are playing at our clubs. Dennis, how are we?
I'm fine, Cammy. Yourself?
Absolutely fantastic, mate. Absolutely fantastic.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Dennis. Thank you and Cammy for having me back on again. Appreciate it.
Not a problem, Scott. It's good to see you. It's good to see you. Dennis, I've been enjoying the sun over here, and I'll tell you, there's not been a day where the temperature is lower than the amount of goals conceded by lousy women's football teams, I'll tell you. You know, I mean, 24, 25 degrees is the coldest it's been over here this last week.
Well, Goodison Park was warmer than that at the end of the game. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, indeed it was. I managed to catch a wee bit of that the other night, you know what I mean? Yeah. So fair play to both sides there for putting on a fantastic spectacle, and indeed for Everton for getting equaliser. But I think the place to start, Dennis, we've both teased it there about the women's football, but let's get the cup shocks out the road first of all. Liverpool and Rangers. I was actually thinking about doing a special tonight, or doing a bit tonight on the lack of cup shocks last weekend, because on the Saturday there was nothing, and it all kicked off on the Sunday. Liverpool going down 1-0 at home park down in Plymouth, but Rangers at home to Queen's Park losing 1-0. Which of the two is the bigger shock, Dennis?
I think probably the Rangers one is more of a shock.
Yeah.
Because I haven't gone into Plymouth, but I'm going to take it that they're full time. Without saying that. So, without stating the obvious, you've got to look at Queen's Park. Now, you go back not that many years, they were in the lower divisions, and they just seem to be making up the numbers. Amateur club, well known for that for probably 100 years. Now they've obviously stepped up a gear, and they have come into the arena and have challenged the big boys. To get to where they were to begin with was excellent. You know, To get to the fourth round is always good with a club at that level. But, you know, if you look at them, they're not exactly pushovers anymore. You know, they're sitting there in fifth spot in the championship, which means you're still in with a shout to some degree. I don't think they will, but they could possibly gain promotion into the Premier League. That would be unthinkable. As the cup goes, I think Rangers probably done enough to win the game. Cammy, I've been through that as a manager. You set your stall out, and the bottom line is, if you don't turn up on that day, it doesn't matter who you're playing. They can beat you. And that's what happened. But I'll tell you what, VAR threw everything at it to try and get them the fixture on their side. Seriously. I mean, I mentioned to you later on, I couldn't believe it. Who in their right mind, and I'll debate it all day long, it was never a penalty in 100 years, because the big centre-half went and won the ball, and with him winning it, it didn't matter whether Desser was there or whether he was in his own goal mouth. He was never getting to that ball. So the push was never, ever obstructing him from getting the ball. That's, to me, end of story. The centre-half went and won it. What went on behind him is totally irrelevant. So it was never a penalty. 2 seconds to go in injury time. And I'm really surprised they didn't have the bottle to go and make them take it again. And to be honest, if that had happened, I would have shut up shop and not watched another game of football, because I would have said it was fixed. It really looked as bad as that. And I'll tell you what, the referees need to get a grip as well. They're getting worse and worse, even with VAR. And they're sitting in their studios and they still can't make a decision. It's shocking. And they're getting paid money for it. This is not an amateur setup we've got in Scotland. It's professional. But, there's an attitude you've got to say to yourself, if these guys can't do the job, get somebody in that can. And they seem to be all in this small goldfish bowl. It's the same referees that are heading it up. So you might have Dallas in the room that's deciding this when you wouldn't have made the decision in the first place. So we need, I think, people that's played the game, understand the game, and can make decisions that will maybe have supporters going away going, I'm not sure about that decision. And then when it comes out, it'll be the understanding that the person that's made the decision can explain, as a footballer, the reasons behind the decision that they made.
Yeah.
We've got people like Dennis and Cammy that don't know the game. They just don't know the game. I've heard some people in different shows rattling their gums about players and decisions, and I'm going, seriously? Now, I know it's all about opinions, and we're quite entitled to it, and it's the same with me. It's only my opinion. But when we're looking at decisions being made, then you've really got... I mean, there was an English game last week, and it was Leicester against... Who were they playing?
Man United.
Man United.
Man United.
Man United player was at least 4 feet off. Now, there was no VAR there, but how bad is that? And when I looked at it in slow motion, the referee was in a wheelchair trying to get up the line to actually catch the play.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, this is no good. We're going backwards.
Yeah. I mean, Scott, the debate there about VAR, etc., obviously you don't have it in your FA Cup because it's not in all the grounds, and I totally agree with that. I was always brought up that the refereeing and decisions should be a level playing field. It's always in the opinion of the referee, not the opinion of some boy sat in a studio, So, they got it wrong against Manchester United or for that Manchester United game. But obviously there wasn't any VAR there to correct the decision. Now, whether they would have done or not, it's another matter. But VAR, is it ruining a game, Scott, or is it actually making it better?
It's completely ruining the game for me. I'm with you exactly, Cammy. I grew up where the referee's decision was final, and I look at it, and when you see something like, let's just take example, Isak's goal against Arsenal, which was chalked off in the first minute of the Carabao Cup semi-final there in the second leg. That he's a toe offside. Yeah. And it's like, hang on a minute, where are we going here? And when you get these lines drawn across the screen, it's like. And then the thing that's really annoying, especially if you're watching it in the stadium, is it's 4 and 5 and 6 minutes to make a decision. It's just taking far too long to do something. Goal line technology is the ball over the line. I get that, completely agree with that bit. But VAR is certainly ruining it, especially as Dennis says, when someone's getting paid for this to sit in a studio who doesn't understand the game, never played the game, doesn't get it. That's a real problem, especially when you see goals like you had Man United against Leicester. It's just
you see, Scott, see that kind of goal. We've suffered this for 100 years or more. Me, probably more than 2 years put together. But the bottom line is, decisions by referees were poor, and the reason, I don't care. We'll use the word poor because that's the reason in my head VAR was brought in to improve the game.
Yeah.
It's not. Instead of one dafty out in the park, you've now got about 4 of them that can't make their mind up. And it's taking 6 minutes, as you say. And I would rather go back to referees making a total disaster of it, like the Leicester and Man U, and live with it, rather than you're thinking you've scored a goal, you're elated, and it could be in the dying minutes, and the next minute, some dafty in the room's decided, no, it's not a goal. So the supporters are up there 1 minute, and then they're in the gutter the next. And as a player, it's 10 times worse, I can assure you. So the bottom line is, we have gone nowhere with VAR.
You mentioned it, Dennis, with the Goodison Park, that Tarkovsky goal at the end there. I mean, how long did that take to be confirmed? It's just going backwards, as you said, and it's taking far too long to get what is a flowing game, or should be a flowing game, to a quick conclusion.
Scott, to me, you get the benefit of the doubt. I'm always keen on the benefit of the doubt. Goalkeepers have had it for a century, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, as we talked about there, you mentioned a toe. That's taking listen, there have been some excellent goals scored, and it gets pulled back for somebody's toe or a finger or something that is. That's all, and I'm saying, wait a minute, there was nothing up with that goal. Just let it go. It was a delight to see the goal. It was outstanding. and you're being punished because somebody wants to sit in a room and split hairs with a toe. That hasn't been the problem that caused that goal. That toe has not created the failure for them to defend that. And that's what should really be looked at. If the VAR is going to improve it and say, no, that guy could have stopped him scoring with that toe, then I'm all for it. But it's not saying that. It's just making a dividing line. It's like a rule book where the traffic warden comes along. You're 30 minutes over, there's your ticket. There's no grey areas.
No. And that's the thing about it. But we're getting away from the main point, obviously, of the cup shocks. Yeah. But before we do move on, Scott, you're talking about decisions taking 6, 7, 8 minutes. Obviously, you and I follow a sport religiously. Sorry, Dennis.
I know. Yeah.
And decisions tend to be made quicker than that. But also, I know, obviously, yourself with the rugby union as well, you know, and obviously you've got the assistant ref in rugby union, and decisions are made so much faster than when you watch the rugby union as well.
Yeah, I think the difference they've had there, especially for things like yellow cards, is having that bunker review where they can just say, look, I don't physically know if it's a yellow or a red card. I'll do the old cross hands, off you go for 10 minutes, and we'll come back to it when somebody sat back in the studio and watched it and said, well, actually, I do think that is a headshot, or, you know, it's probably worthy of a red card. They'll go through that framework, and then it'll come back onto the field, and the ref will just call the captains together and say, that's now upgraded to a red.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we need to do something. I'm not saying we need to do something like that, but it's just more and more stoppages in football that's taking far too long with VAR. I understand the premise of why it was brought in, and I get the decisions as to why it was brought in, but it just hasn't worked. It hasn't worked since it's been in.
Yeah. Dennis, before long, you'll have a game of soccer lasting even longer than the sport that Scott and I follow, you know, football, and it's going to come down to VAR decisions. But again, getting back to the cup shocks, you know, obviously Rangers shocked by Queen's Park. Whether they should have won the game or not, they didn't. They had the chance at the end, obviously, with the penalty. I think you're right. I think it is the bigger shock. But what I will say in relation to the Plymouth-Liverpool game is obviously Plymouth, the poorest defensive record in the English football leagues. You know, that they can't buy a win until obviously during the week there when they got a 5-1 win, but they've got one of the poorest records in England. Liverpool, who are scoring for fun, couldn't manage to find the net at home park at all. So I think there's an argument there where you could say Liverpool was the bigger shock just purely and simply based on that, but they rested a lot of players, you know, and then obviously Rangers are at home as well, you know. So
I was going to say, Cammy, that Rangers are at home. That's the difference. Yep. As Dennis explained, Queen's Park were a part-time side not so long ago. Plymouth are still in the Championship of English football. Yeah, they're bottom, you know what I mean, and they're plumb last. They've got a brand new manager in. They've clearly had that manager bounce. They've had two decent centre-halves who they've brought in. Ukrainian boy I can't remember his name, but he was very good. But when you're changing a Liverpool side with 9 changes from the previous week, that's the problem. And sometimes, as we'll get into, the foreign players don't seem to want to go down to a massively long journey. I mean, I've been to Plymouth and I've drove from Carlisle to Plymouth, and I can tell you it is not a decent journey. Not for the one they're trying. It's a long way. So even coming from Liverpool to Plymouth, you know, the other end of the country, it's a long way to go.
I would take it they will fly. Because we
probably,
know
most likely, yeah.
Chelsea went when we know that Chelsea everywhere outside London. Chelsea flew. The other top flight teams all fly now, and you know you've got smaller airports as well. The days of a round trip is only the supporters and the
26 hours, Dennis. That was for me, mate.
Yeah. so
yeah.
So that's an even less excuse for them. They've been sitting in first class in a plane lately.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true.
Yeah,
very true.
I think for a lot of these players, that'll be the first experience of that, Dennis.
Yeah. Well, I think, though, that the Scottish Cup was a bigger shock. Yeah. Maybe because I'm Scottish, but I'm sure if you were speaking to Scott, if you were a Liverpool supporter, we'd be having a big a big discussion on it because it's important for them. And I think also when you look at the Liverpool thing, they've been going so strong. I watched them the week before, and they were outstanding. And I mean, they were absolutely brilliant. And it was just a poor game. I think both teams had a really bad day off. Although Rangers, when you start to get into it a bit more, it was the road crash waiting to happen.
Where does that leave Clements? Where does it leave him now?
and a job, because
he's got a job.
The two that are actually running that club at this moment in time have not got the bottle to go and get rid of him. I mean, right, okay. I think they would be better thought of if they put him out the door and get somebody in. Then I think, Cammy, I think the club and supporters would then think, well, at least they're seen to be doing something.
Just but now, Dennis, who are they going to bring in?
Well, what they're doing is they'll probably be sitting there with all the coffers which they can bring in, counting all the 50 pences that they're saving. And then they'll keep that and they will use this as an angle to try and get the season tickets loaded up for next year.
Yeah.
Because the season's done, right? So
but you spoke last week about Rangers signing a player for Dundee and they couldn't afford the transfer fee. So there's absolutely no way they can afford to pay Clement off. You know, so they're stuck with a guy who is doing a lousy job for by and by. For most of the season, he's doing a lousy job. He can get a lift in Europe, and Rangers, fair play to them, they've done fantastic in Europe. They've managed to lift their game in the league, but Clement cannot get consistent performances out of Rangers at all.
In Scotland, there's only one thing really matters to real Rangers supporters, and that is beating Celtic and winning the Premiership. Forget the rest. Because normally, with the exception of this year, both teams are out of Europe before Christmas. So you've got from Christmas to May, where it's a battle. But if you don't get any battle because you've lost the league before you're out of February, really, then it's a non-event. Now, the guy, to me, has shown that he doesn't understand what's needed to win games in Scotland, right? Yeah. He throws a team in the park, and as I've said, the last 3-4 weeks, because of his injuries, he's had a couple of results because he just gets one of these soft hats, even like what you're wearing now, Cammy. He throws the numbers in there and he just pulls out 11.
Yeah.
Because it was nearly as bad as that with the injuries. But you look at some of the players, they're not motivated for him. You know, you've got players out there, and I'm thinking, you shouldn't be paid any more than a couple of £1,000 a week. No in their 20s and £27,000 for Dessers, and you're going out of Scottish Cup. I'm going seriously. So I don't think the manager brings anything to that club. And I think he's exhausted the patience of the supporters. I'll be honest with you, I think they've been very patient with him, because this is about the third blip he's had in relation to other managers who are going out the door. And it's because of being so shambolic with the guy Beale before it, they're now wondering, where do we go from here? And some of the names that have been thrown up that I looked at last week, they're not going to fit the bill either.
No.
Rangers have got a major problem in their hands. And it's not just on the playing part. It's from the playing part, the management, the coaching, and the board of directors. The whole shooting match is needing rejigged. It's needing looked at with a longer-term plan. And it's needing people to come in here and understand the game. And it also should be looking at, and they've tried it, and I would be looking for now to the end of the season to use Murray Park and get the youngsters out playing against other teams and see if there's anything there. You might manage to get 3 players, if possible, that could do a job, instead of having some scout maybe going to Africa and trying to bring guys back here that are no fit for purpose. You know, we've seen it the other night there with St Mirren, and you've got guys for different continents. You know, the big guy, Lasagna, if he'd been decent and up to fit for his job, he would have had St Mirren up 4-0 at half-time. They should have been 4-0 up. He missed 3 great chances. And I'm thinking, what are you bringing these guys into this country for? You surely get players, maybe even at Queen's Park, that would do a job for you. Mm-hmm. So I think our game is getting hammered. And you touched on it, that you were going to mention it anyway. We need to start looking at talent that is no going outside the UK.
Yeah.
If you even look at Tamworth, who played Tottenham Hotspur, I reckon there was 2 or 3 players that could have played in the Premier League.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of other non-league games I've watched recently. Scott, you'll maybe know it better because you watched that level. And I'm saying to myself, why are we no hunting around about some of these non-league teams and bringing them up? There is good players there. They're better than what we've got in the Premier League. And it's up to you as a manager, if you're at Celtic or Rangers, to get the best out of them. Don't bring in players ready-made. Anybody can do that. I can go and do it. But I'll tell you what, if you're bringing in a guy that's needing coached, then you've got to do it. And I don't think half of them can coach a player or get the best out of them. And I think that's what Clements is like at Rangers. Some of them will get talent, but he doesn't know how to get the best out of them.
Yeah,
No, I
100%.
completely agree with you there. I mean, there's a lot of players who you can look at either in the northeast or the northwest, south of the border, that are in the lower leagues that could easily get into Scottish Premiership sides. I mean, we were talking before we got on air about Luke Armstrong, Luke Plange, both playing for Motherwell now. I've seen them both play live, and you said, Dennis, that people down who at your work have said the same thing. Luke Armstrong was awful for Carlisle, watching him this season and last season. But then there's players like that you were talking about there, like why is Owen Moxon, who was really, really good for us, has Scottish League experience playing for Annan, what goes to Portsmouth, who are a decent Championship side, why is he signing for Stockport? Why isn't the likes of an Aberdeen or a Hearts or Hibs or any of the on the fringes? Maybe Rangers and Celtic is different. I get that, but outside of them top two, you probably say he could fit in any of them teams, and it's not going to cost you a massive amount of money either.
No. I mean, Molson was decent.
I'm just wondering if the people in the terraces, and I would love to know what a vote would come out in this, of whether they want the guy with the bobbled hair. I'm using him as one player, there'll be others, or the feather hair sticking all over the place. And would they rather have somebody that looks the part or can play the part? And that's the problem I've got nowadays. They seem to think that when this agent comes along and they have a look at him and all singing, all dancing, he's even got the hair that goes with the war dances. And I'm saying to myself, that's not what we want. We don't want that. We want people that can play football, first and foremost.
Yeah.
We don't need to go to the other side of the world to do it because there's a cost incurred with that. And they also don't lend themselves personally, the way I think about it, to the way the Scottish game is played.
Yeah, 100%.
We can only look at Europe as and when we do well in the domestic league, right? And it's proven. Aberdeen, Hearts, Kilmarnock, almost a non-event. But that's because they're struggling to get themselves set as a team that's competing in the Premier League. But it seems to me that we're not really bringing the right players in to compete in the Premier League. We're bringing in some of these guys as I've nothing against. It's the same way everything else we talk about, religion and all the rest of it. I've not got an issue with a guy coming from Africa or Mozambique or wherever he comes, if he can come and play. But unfortunately, we must have better talent within the UK that we can afford that will do a better job.
You have to wonder about the scouting at some of these clubs. And as I say, these figures I'm going to read out, they are correct. I've got to say 18 months ago, so they're October 2023. But I think there's still a great deal of relevance to them. As of October 2023, there was 3 leagues in Europe or in UEFA that have a higher percentage of non-homegrown talent, if you like. So you're talking about Cyprus has got 70% of its players who were of foreign nationals. Then there's Greece, then Turkey, then it's the Scottish Premier League, then it's Serie A and the Premier League in England. But the difference between Scotland and the 2 leagues below them is they're bringing in quality players. As you say, Scotland, we tend to be bringing in foreign players who are either struggling to adapt to the heat, the lack of heat, to the cold, to the style of play. It's much more physical, apparently, up here than it is elsewhere, so they don't have the physique to deal with the Scottish game, And I think we do need to be questioning seriously what the impact of these clubs bringing in so many foreign players to the nation, to their clubs, is doing on the league. It's going to be having a detrimental effect on the national side. We know that. But it's having a massive effect on the trash that we're having to watch week in, week out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when you look at Celtic, right? I'm just going to look. I can't remember the guy's name, so I'm going to look it up. Right. Who is he? The boy that they brought in last week at left back to replace Taylor? It's no Scales. I don't know where the boy's there. I haven't got it. Anyway, they brought another lad in after the young boy went back to Barcelona, if you recall.
Yeah.
So, and then I look at, and I watched it quite closely, and then I say to myself, Celtic's no short of Abertut. And I watched the Hearts against St Mirren, and the boy Penrice, outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. in comparison, and this is where I'm comparing it, against what Celtic have had in that left channel all year. His deliveries into the box, and he's a good bit away from it, but you know what he reminded me without going up the channels too much? A young Andy Robertson.
Yeah.
And I'm saying to myself, see if you buy him. Where's your loss? I'll tell you what you've gained. You've opened up that left back position when you go to play Hearts for one. Maybe not the best defender in the world. He's not the finished article by any manner of means. But when I look at what Celtic have got and what they brought in, boy, he was all over the place, the new boy, the last 2 games.
We just bought Jota, haven't they? Is that?
No, they've brought the other lad in. I'll get it in a minute. But the thing is, he come in and I thought to myself, he's in the lion's den to begin with, right? And Taylor's no fit. What's it called? I'll come back to it. Okay. So I'm looking at it, I'm saying, why have you brought him in when it's Schlupp is his name?
Jeffrey Schlupp. Yeah, Jeffrey Schlupp.
Jeffrey Schlupp, down south,
yeah. Palace, I think he was at
one.
Palace.
But
he only used to play for Leicester.
What was wrong with going for the boy Penrice at Hearts? I'm only making a comparison when we look at keeping Scottish talent here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just say, there's an example when we don't need to look too far. Is it because we think it's trendy to be going the other side of the world or getting an English player up here? I'm sorry, we need to get back to grassroots to understand what we're meant to be doing. And that was a prime example where I made the comparison between Monday night and Celtic's Champions League game. And I thought to myself, something drastically wrong here when we're not identifying. Even Rangers going for him, because Rangers have had problems in the left-back position.
Yeah.
Or even if they sign him for the summer or something, they just, I don't know.
There's something drastically wrong with it. The scouting systems up here where they are not looking at players at lower league clubs. You know, I mean, you're talking about Andy Robertson there, Dennis. Andy Robertson went from Queen's Park to Dundee United, from Dundee United to Hull, from Hull to Liverpool. You know, so he was never a finished article when he left Queen's Park. Dundee United nurtured him and coached him, got a few quid for him when he went to Hull, and he spent 18 months at Hull City and turned into a decent player. Get back to your days. Where did Alan Hansen start off? He started off at Partick Thistle before Liverpool put a punt on him. Yep. You know, we've got the history of players. Celtic loaned out Kenny Dalglish to the juniors, you know, to try and make something of him. You know, if we want to go back that far. Too often now, clubs want to try and think they've got the finished article and they can bring in these players for the cheap from some of the wildernesses in world football. And it's just not working. It just is not working, and it's going to stagnate our game both north and south of the border as well for you guys, Scott, because I think your national team will eventually start to suffer. I think you're already starting to see it, you know, and you've got a few quality players and a few talented guys still playing at Manchester City and some of the bigger clubs, but they're just, as a country, I think you're going to start to suffer for the lack of quality English talent being nurtured and coming through.
I think it's just a cutthroat industry at the minute, and that's part of the problem of being in youth setups. You know, how many players do you see on a weekly basis where you look round a random Premier League game and it's a guy who's played for 2 youth setups from one of either the big, supposedly big 4, big 5, and he's playing up front for Aston Villa. And you're like, hang on a minute, what? Who's this? And you've got no idea, and it'll be the same stagnation if you've got in north of the border. You know, in Scotland, it's going to have a detrimental effect in years to come from kids that are wanting to play football now. You know, where is the feeder system that used to be able to go, right? Well, I'm playing for Cowden Beath now, but you know, next year I might be playing for Dunfermline, and then the next year after that, I could have a couple of good seasons with them, and then I've maybe got a chance of getting into the Premiership with a team. You know what I mean? It's difficult to say, well, that's where I'm gonna go, because anyone can have a good season in that Scottish Championship and get themselves into the next level for one season. But it's tough to look around and think, well, where's the next production line? Where are we going to be in 5-10 years' time when there's kids who are maybe not wanting to do that because we're being overrun by either talent that doesn't make it down south and they think they can make a fast buck on players that have been released from youth systems, or, as you said, you're importing the talent from elsewhere.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
It's not going to work.
No, I think one of the things as well is that if you look at what we have at home, we're not utilising it. I'll go back to Penrice. The thing is, it won't cost Celtic or Rangers anywhere near where it would cost if they go to Crystal Palace or another club with the quality, because they're not going to let that player go because he's of value to them. And I'm yet to be convinced that Kearney will appear here in the summer. If he does, I don't know what they're doing with this one, because the boy is injury prone. He's hardly set the hell on fire at Arsenal simply because of his injuries. Now, you could be buying a damp squib here, and it could cost him a lot of money, when in actual fact, cut your losses, go and get the left back at Hearts. You'll sell him on, you'll make money, right? That's what Celtic do. They want players in, but they're continually shortchanging the supporters by not bringing the best quality in. I'm not going to go through that team tonight in Celtic, right, in relation to each one individually. But in the next few weeks, there's an element where Brendan Rodgers sings their praises and then they fall into the gutter. And there's been a few recently that he's sung their praises and they haven't performed. And they're very fortunate because the Premier League in Scotland is not testing them. They do get tested when they go to Bayern Munich and stuff like that. But if you look at it, and I talk about the left-back position, you need to look at the 2 goals again from Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
Where Harry Kane, one of the biggest threats in world football, has a free header at the back post. Left back, where are you? Surely that's something you work on in training. Now, your manager's got to be accountable for that, because he's got to be picked up. I don't care what you say. You stop him scoring, you've done your job, son. That's not happened. There's a big gap at the back. I rewound it right away and I went, seriously? Kane's got that much space? No, it should never happen. So to me, Celtic are flawed, big time.
That lad Penrice, did he play for Partick Thistle for a while? Before he went to Hearts?
No idea.
Because I'm sure I've seen him play actually, and I do remember him as a talent. Mm-hmm. Pretty certain he did play for Partick for a while.
But I think maybe the agents have got to maybe sit up and look at themselves a wee bit, and they should be questioned that when you're presenting somebody, you get into somebody's office and you're trying to sell them something. And I've said this a few weeks ago. Don't be scamming them, because there's an element of scamming them. The products are no fit for purpose. Don't tell you this guy will score you 20 goals and you're lucky if he gets 2 assists. Yeah. But he looks great. He's got all the hairdos, this big streamers and everything out his hair. But I'll tell you what, he looks a business. No, I can't even wish for that. Now, maybe we used the word on me last week, dinosaur. It probably is, but it's just my opinion. Yeah. And I don't think that I think supporters in general are shortchanged with the rubbish that's been put in the park.
Yeah, Scott, you're right. Penrice started his career at Thistle.
Did he?
Then he went on loan to East Fife, went to Livy, and then for Livy he went to Hearts. So he's not a young lad, Dennis. He's 26-year-old, So
no, but listen,
there's every possibility there. 2 goals, 3 assists. That's no bad for a left back. You
watch his deliveries into the box, Cammy. His deliveries into that box were outstanding against St Mirren. Absolutely outstanding. And it's a while since I've seen that. I don't normally pick up the individual, but in this instance I will, because the boy has got a future if somebody gives him the opportunity. He's got an opportunity at Hearts, of course, but at the same time, there's a bigger platform there. And with Celtic and Rangers, certainly Celtic not confirmed a left back. Rangers could do with one. They're the 2 big 2, or get yourself down south, son.
Yeah. But he's done it the right way. He started at Firhill. He's built, he's went East Fife, he's went Livingston, and obviously the Premier League. And then he's moved on to bigger and better things at Hearts, So that's what we were talking about earlier on in terms of developing talent, and looking into the lower leagues for players who are quality. One final question, Dennis. It's going to sound loaded before we leave this spot about the amount of foreign players. Who's the world champions?
Argentina.
What country won the World Cup?
Argentina.
I'm pretty sure it was Spain.
No,
I'm pretty sure. No. I'm going to say Spain, because I'm pretty sure Spain, or whoever it is, they're European champions anyway. Spain.
Yeah.
If you look across UEFA at the amount of expatriates in league, take the big 5 leagues. Spain have got 10% less foreign players than the next big league, which is the Germans. And I think that's pretty much what you're looking at there. In terms of if you're wanting to succeed on an international stage, you need to develop your own homegrown players, and Spain are doing that. And if you're talking about Argentina, across the world, Argentina have the second least amount of foreign players playing in their leagues.
Yeah, I think some of the stats you mentioned before,
I'm
Cammy,
sure.
was loaded on the Cypriots being.
I don't know.
top.
I don't know. 2022. I don't even know why I'm looking up.
I
beat France scored 2 penalties. So how was it
right.
loaded?
I apologise. No, I'm saying I was asking a loaded question there in terms of Spain being a successful nation, in terms of Argentina being a successful nation, asking the question, who is the most successful nation in the world just now? It's these 2 countries, and they're the 2 countries with the lowest percentage of foreign players in their league. So they're obviously developing homegrown talent to succeed on a national stage.
But there's quite a few of them actually play in the UK.
There is. But in terms, obviously, at home as well, if you look at Spain have got more Spaniards playing than foreign players, but whereas every other country across the world has got more foreign players playing for them. And do
you think that's down to instant success? And this is something that we could maybe. I'm not saying let's just touch on it, but do you think it's down to the want society of not allowing teams or players or managers to build over time and say, as you said, Dennis, earlier, have a competitive Scottish Premier League where you have 4 or 5 teams that are vying for it, and you think, with a month to go, as you said, in like April, it could be one of 4 teams winning the league. And then, I thought Aberdeen were going to put up a decent fist of it this year, but they dropped off. And then you think, well, maybe it's going to get a bit more competitive like that in years to come. But at the moment where it's just them top 2 teams, and as you said, it's over by the end of February, what's the point? Of course, because it's the culture of we need to win now.
Yeah. Well, you'll always find that the big 2 there are driven to their success financially. It's a financial thing. Nobody's going to compete unless they get somebody from the Middle East or somewhere like that and plough a lot of money into the lower teams. Hearts are doing their best, but it's never, ever going to be to the level of what you would do to overcome Celtic and Rangers.
Right.
I can't see that ever happening because the product is not good enough to sell out with playing against Celtic and Rangers. That's a problem you've got. It's about selling the product. We can't even get games on normal TV. Cup ties last week, you get the English games, but you couldn't get the Scottish game, and you've got to pay for it. And I'm thinking, who's coining this in? The ordinary guy in the street that probably can't get to football matches now for whatever reason. It's quite sad because they've supported the clubs all their years, and for whatever reason, unfit, whether they don't work, or money or whatever, the bottom line is they can't get to the game, but they've got television. And some of them don't have the facility to pay for whatever one it's been thrown up now, because, again, it's getting more diluted. There's more and more coming in, all want their piece of the cake. And the 2 big boys, we'll have that, never mind the supporters. So I look at it and I say it's a financial thing that the smaller clubs will now soon have to be self-dependent. And that's where our argument going into another thing about artificial surfaces, because they need to get revenue from all different sources. But I'll go back to it, which was our original thing, bringing foreign imports into Scotland to improve the game hasn't worked, and it will never work. We have seen some coming in. Europeans especially have been excellent, or Scandinavian, they've done right good jobs. But we seem to be stretching ourselves away outside Europe now to bring players in. And I keep repeating it, are not good enough to do the job. Yeah. And managers are under pressure with that. Seriously. You look at, I go back to the game on Monday night, easily the 3 chances that Lasagna missed could easily have got somebody the sack. And it's not good enough. So I look at it and I can have a rant all day long. I don't think this will change very soon. I don't, because it's a financial thing. And I think some of these boys coming in will not be earning a lot of money. They won't. And therefore it's an easy option. It's all money driven. And you look at it, and what was it yesterday? £7 million Hibs lost last year. I think it was 7 million.
Wow.
How can you lose that?
Well, unfortunately, that's the way it's going. And I mean, who are Hibs trying to compete with? You know, that's the thing. They're not going to compete with Rangers. They're not going to compete with Celtic. They're struggling to compete with Hearts. You know, and they don't have a manager who I would imagine is coining in big money. It's not a big name they have in charge at Hibs. You know, so wonder what kind of players they're bringing in. You know, what kind of wages they're playing. Because let's be fair, I mean, Easter Road gets a decent crowd. You know, I know how much you rave about going to Tynecastle, but Easter Road gets a decent crowd.
Yes,
you know, so
good club, really good club.
You know, and if they're losing £7 million, that's down to mismanagement. It can only be, and it's obviously down to again paying too much to players. You know, and not having the revenue from TV and not having the revenue for other sources as well.
How many people in the normal day's work, if they were director of football or they identified the player and they put their name against it and there was 100,000 here or £500,000 to get him for a year or 2 years, how many people in normal life, if they made these kind of catastrophic decisions, would be in work the following year? I don't know anybody. I look at the people I work with. If we made these kind of blunders by people turning up to their work and they were useless, no fit for purpose. Useless is a wee bit hard. Not as good as you were thinking you were buying into is maybe better.
Yeah.
The problem is it's the identification of these players and who's accountable for signing off this. I think the days have gone by now where the manager's fully into it, but he will have a say, I'm sure. But the bottom line is, when this player has been presented to you, do you not have a trial period in your head, or is it straight, there's £500,000 that's going to cost us? Because I've complained about the quality of the Hibs defence the last 2 years. It's improved a little bit, maybe a big bit this year, right? But the last 2 seasons before it, they were absolutely shocking. Now, I'd assume that's where they've accumulated that £7 million loss. This came from whoever bought the players in, and they're just being good enough. So you look at back and you say, that's where the clubs have got to tighten up. That's where they've got to identify when we spend money, is it dead money? Is it money that we can recoup?
Well, that's the thing, you're not getting money back in. But Scott, I mean, how often now over the last 10, 15 years have we all been guilty of saying, you know, about football now, it's a business. As Dennis says, what other business are you going to get away with losing £7 million? You know, so football wants a business.
Yeah, exactly what Dennis was saying. I'm seeing it firsthand as a Carlisle fan. We've just brought in 12 new players in a January transfer window and sacked the manager on deadline day. Mm-hmm. So we're on to our third manager right now. We have American owners, as I said last time on your show, who took over. Yeah. And I'm honestly, we're in the process of probably losing about 2 mil off transfers alone in a season. You know, you're paying players massive wages, like $9,000 a week, $7,000 a week, and this is we're 92nd out of 92 in the football league. Do you know what I mean? And you're 6 points adrift, and you've got how much does it cost to pay someone off, a manager, who's just come in on a 3-year deal, and you've already paid $250,000 to his previous club to bloody get him here. It's bonkers.
What kind of people are negotiating these deals? There's my worry.
People who are not football people, Dennis, and that's the problem.
How's a new manager expected to build a squad when you bring in 12 new players as well?
Yeah, that's exactly that.
Cammy, there's always a budget at every football club, right? But it seems to me when you look at Carlisle, what is the promises that you're going to get for that money?
Yeah.
Nothing.
You buy a car, it'll do 100 mile an hour if you pay X amount for it. Or you buy whatever else for 30,000 or whatever. It's not going to go at the same speed, right? So you buy what you can afford. And when you look at Carlisle, if the American owners are wanting to throw that kind of money away, then so be it. that money doesn't become an issue then. But when you want to progress, you want value for your money. And that then needs good football people to identify the right people and bring them in. Now, it's scattered all over the place. The players are coming in, and every weekend that I'm looking at games, or even during the week, I'm seeing flaws that, even at my level, I would never have signed them in a million years. Yeah. And they're picking up good money. They really are. Yep. And I'm saying, who's identified that guy as being a good footballer?
Exactly that.
Yeah. But before we move on, just one final point on that, Scott. Then, do you think Wrexham have got a lot to be guilty for Carlisle wanting to throw that kind of money away, or?
Quite possibly, but it goes back to my earlier point. In all walks of football, whatever you're at, it's about the wanting success right now. That's the thing. Everyone wants success at a football club, but it's short-lived, and it's not. And there's no long-term vision and sustainability of what it is. Because lower league football, which I watch, and Scottish football will be exactly the same. It's about how you can sustain long-term progression. That's what you need in the game, and it needs to be driven from the grassroots upwards.
Well, you just don't need to look too far away for your back door. Gretna.
Correct. Yeah.
That's a prime example where money bought success, and then when that money dries up, they're back now playing in the Lowland League.
Yeah.
So you look at it and you say to yourself, money does help, but I think it's got to be managed an awful lot better by who you bring in. So the supporter's money that he pays every Saturday is getting value for money. And it's not just some guy that's come in that's lying in his pockets and he's not doing a job.
Yeah, indeed.
Couldn't agree more.
Indeed. Listen, don't you tell him that. Don't tell him somebody's starting to agree with him, for God's sake. Come on, Scott. I'm going to listen to him every week. Right. Quickly, we'll move on to something I know Dennis and I will agree with, but Scott, I don't know, obviously, yourself. We touched on it last week when we had Graham Duffy on. Graham had mentioned to us the argument between Shabana Hearn and Alan Brazil on TalkSport, which has obviously hit the national media. Everybody was aware of it last week except Dennis and I, at the point in time where Graham told us. I've looked into it a wee bit in terms of they had a disagreement in terms of Manchester United's policy.
Yep.
You know, Manchester United have got a policy now where they've got this Plan 21 and Plan 1, or whatever it's called, you know, in terms of they want the women to get their first league title. They want the men to get their 21st. Probably the women have got a better chance. They're only 6 points behind Chelsea. I think Manchester United are probably about 4 years behind Liverpool or Manchester City or Chelsea or whoever else, you know. But Ahern was saying that the women virtually have as much right and as much backing as what the men should have. Obviously, we disagreed on that, and we've looking at broadening it a wee bit, Dennis, in terms of, obviously, Graham mentioned last week that you look at the women's game now, and I think we're all in agreement with this. They can't buy a goalkeeper to save themselves. Man, you know, unless you're Glasgow City, Rangers or Celtic, you're getting trounced week in, week out up here in Scotland. And I think down south, Chelsea are much the same. You know, Chelsea are the biggest dominant force in women's football down there. They've drawn 1 in 112 of their games. Manchester United have got a long way to go to catch that. But where do we go with women's football against the men, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, do I think it's the right thing for women and young girls to do? Absolutely. It's everybody's game. I completely agree with that, and I think it's fantastic. Should they be paid? We hear this a lot, and on the same level as the Manchester United first teams? No, not until the product on the field is as good as what we get at. The biggest thing out of all of this fallout for me between Alan Brazil and what went on TalkSport. Look at Jim Ratcliffe, who owns Man United. What was he doing at the time when the women were lifting the first ever FA Cup? He was watching the men against Arsenal at Old Trafford. That says it all for me. You know what I mean? If he was that interested in what the women's game was doing, he would be there going, well, hang on a minute, the women's team can win the first ever trophy here. And he would have been at that game. Instead, he's watching the men play Arsenal because in his mind, he knows what's important. The choice of words on Dinosaur of Alan Brazil, it's a poor choice of words. I get that, but I understand where Alan was coming from. I did enjoy Gabby Agbonlahor being the peacemaker in the middle of it, but now we've seen people like Jeff Stelling's now got himself involved in it all. Yep. There's been a bit of a Twitter spat around it, and he's saying no, that's this is the level of what we're getting at. But we've talked about it as well. You shouldn't be on a bus, a luxury bus or a flight to wherever you're going to. I mean, Man United's women will fly routinely to London and vice versa. That's until you can get that level up and you can get into, and there's some very, very good women's football teams out there in Europe who are exceptional. Till you get to that standard, you can't ask for parity. You can't, until you're selling stadiums out every week, you can't ask for parity. Because I enjoy the women's game, I do watch it. You know what I mean? Did I watch the Lionesses? Absolutely, I did. But it's not. It's going to take years to get to the level, and it is going to take absolutely years and years, maybe decades, to get anywhere near that. Because we all know where Man United's main market is. It's marketing that team abroad and around the world to bring in more revenue to make the first team better for the men's. It's as simple as that.
Dennis, I totally agree with Scott there and what he says. And in terms of until the women are self-sufficient, you talked about it earlier on in the lower leagues, until the women are self-sufficient and aren't subsidised by the men's team, they have no entitlement, in my eyes, to ask for, as Scott says, parity in terms of wages, parity in terms of travel, parity in terms of anything at all. That's my thinking. I'm pretty sure you're going to be the same.
Without a doubt. I'll say again, like Scott, I would love women's football to really get up a gear. It'll not happen because it's not ready for it yet. They've got a long way to go. But I'd love them to have a Ronaldo or a Messi, and I'll be the first one a ticket to go and watch them. Just now, you can't get a goalkeeper that can save a shot. No. I just wish that some kids now realise, wait a minute, I'm a girl. I just need to really hit the target and I can score. Make myself a few bob. I checked it out, Cammy. I think it goes from about 6,000 to 20,000, which is the Premier League salary of Scottish football ladies.
Yep.
So it's not enough that if you want to stop working, in my eyes. I think if you think that's a real job, which a lot of them do, they're delusional. But then I think a lot of them is delusioned with the fact that they think they are in a level playing field with men. I think they think they're as good as men in a lot of cases because they demand the same things as men. And that means pitches, it means gear, it means everything else. And as I said last week, and I always feel sorry for it because I've been through it. At the side of a pitch, when I was at East Stirling, when we didn't have this particular gym open, we're at the side of the park with the headlights of the cars on to try and get us some lights so we could train. These girls, half of these girls will not experience that. Let them go in the trenches first and then come back. In other words, get your brownie points first. And the saying it's probably born, they've got a Ferrari before the license. Yeah. And that doesn't work with me. You've got to have an added value if you're playing in that team. No turning up, looking the business. And to be honest, you can't really play football hen. But when we look at it, you're playing in the best pitches, you'll get the best gear, you're getting paid for it well, and then you look at 300 yards along the road, you've got guys playing junior football for a pittance, some of them, and are far, far superior. And if it was a toss a coin just now for me where I'm going to go and watch, I'm going to that junior game for men.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's the Alan Brazil thing, because he said nobody cares. It's not a matter of nobody cares. What he should have said was the level women's football's at, it doesn't entice most men that watch men's football to go and watch it. Right?
That's it.
And that then might have prevented her calling him a dinosaur. But she's out of order because she thinks the women have a divine right to everything that's going. I'll explain. Last week, I'm going to Stirling on the Sunday. I passed the motorway and I glance across at the other side of the road, and here's this magnificent bus coming down the other way, Aberdeen FC, all over it. Purpose built with the looks of it, luxury, right? I couldn't even go on holiday in that bus. It would be too expensive. So I'm looking at it.
You get the Pensioner discount.
Aye, okay. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, it's 12 o'clock. I think Aberdeen's playing at home against Dunfermline. So I'll leave it at that. Come back home and I'm thinking maybe it's the reserves or whatever. And again, I look at the fixtures. Rangers ladies are playing Aberdeen ladies at Broadwood Stadium. So I then look at it as the game goes on, 1-0, 2-0, and cut a long story short, 10-0 to Rangers. They've come all the way down in that bus, total luxury, 22 shots against Aberdeen's had, not one attempt in goal, not one. Now you've got, I would take it Scott Booth's a full-time manager at Aberdeen. Then I go in and I try and find, what's it costing Aberdeen to have this women's football team? Because we're back to what I was talking about earlier, finances. Could be one player, but that one player could win you the Premiership. Mm-hmm. So I look back into it, and it's a smoke screen. When I looked it up, there was no disclosure of what it was costing Aberdeen to run the women's football team. It gets taken in and almost hidden, because most people will be up my arms if they found out what it was costing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I look at it and I go, you've asked the question, there is a place for women's football. Not for me. And they can be up my arms all they want. But I'll tell you what, I think it's scandalous that a female can actually call somebody a dinosaur who's never seen anywhere near how good a player Alan Brazil was. And she is not qualified to call him a dinosaur. And I think it's disgraceful that she said it.
Yep,
100%. I mean, the bit I got there, I mean, I'll always go back to 2 years ago. I actually watched a game, and it was the Wrexham Red Dragons against the US women's team. And the US women's team was the big thing at the time. And you had a 46-year-old Lee Trundle playing up front. He scored 6 goals and they lost 12-0.
Yeah.
Now, 46 years old. He wasn't even playing football then. And we know that he had a great career for Wales and in Swansea and all them sort of teams. But he's 46 years old. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and it was absolutely not competitive in any way, shape, or form. Now, that's not to say that it's not the right thing and young girls shouldn't be inspired to watch it. Absolutely, they should be. And dads should be out there taking the daughters to the football, or mums should be taking the daughters to the football. There's no issue with that. I think that's fantastic. But until it gets competitive, as you said, Dennis, they've got no right to sit there and say, we want absolute parity at all.
Yeah. Again, I'm all for it. I'm delighted. And as I said last week, I would rather go and watch a women's football match with smiles, with all this verbal abuse and bad
getting that either.
And to me, I would rather have that kind of manner at a women's football match than what we're seeing in the men's game. But as I say, it's got a long way to go. I hope they get there, but I don't think it'll be in my lifetime.
No, I definitely don't think so. All you dinosaurs will be extinct by the time that happens. Let's be fair. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I'll very, very quickly touch on it. You've got ladies now who are portraying themselves as role models. Men have done it for years, whether they want the right to do that or not. And I don't think they should, by the way. I think, Scott, you should be your kids' role models. I should have been mine. Dennis used to have been Christopher's and everything else, But girls are now looking up to female football players. They're looking up to whoever it is. The only one I can happen to mention, I'm afraid, is Sam Kerr, who in the news this week has done everything but be a role model, in terms of what she's done. And I think that's where you're saying about women's football now is portrayed as being holier than thou and a wonderful fun and a great exhibition. I think women now are at a stage where they really need to seriously start taking a look at what they're portraying themselves as off the pitch as well.
I disagree with that. I think you've got to be held to the same standard. If you want the same standard, you've got to hold yourself to the same standard. Exactly. You can't have that have a difference of attitude or opinion there.
I think what Cammy's saying is, and I know I ain't getting into too much depth. She was found not guilty of abuse.
Racially aggravated assault, I think it was.
Right. Yeah, right. She was found not guilty with it, but I read it and I thought, I don't know how she got away with that. But on the back of it, and you asked me the question earlier, Cammy, about before we come on, I don't think it's the relevance of what we're here to talk about tonight, really. I want to comment too much on. You'll get it with male footballers as well. They go off the rails, and she's probably maybe snapped, and maybe later on she regrets it. If she doesn't, well, that's up to her. Seriously.
Yeah, no. As I say, I'm just talking about as a role model. I wasn't want to discuss the case or anything like that at all. And she was the only one whose name I know. You know, obviously because she's high profile and because she's been in the news. You know, and if they're looking for parity as females, they have to obviously take on the same standards as men, and that's behaving themselves off the park as well. You know, they can't be acting like some footballers for 20, 30 years ago, you know, Tony Adams, Paul Merson, the likes of it, you know what I mean, if they're wanting that parity now, you know, so they need to behave themselves and
really,
be held accountable.
Really, she got away with it. So it's not been a learning curve, is it? So the bottom line is until the next one comes along, there is an element there that they sort of look down their nose at the men's football game as if they have arrived. And that's what I would like them to clean up a wee bit. Look, you can be equal, but you know, walk before you can run. And I think that's what they're lacking. They think they've arrived and they're far from arriving yet. They're 100% in men's football.
Yep. Anyway, guys, it's been a fun show, somewhat controversial, but actually no bad. We done pretty well tonight. We reined it in pretty well. Dennis, thanks as always. Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate you coming on tonight. Tell us what else you're up to, Scott. What else you do? Where can people find you and get more of your work?
Well, if they want to, they can watch the 1 Point Safety Show. It's on YouTube. That's 1 Point Safety 4. If you want to watch us talk about American football, you can obviously come along. That's absolutely no problem. But it's a pleasure, as always, you having me on. I thank you for your time and Dennis's time. It's been great. I love talking any sport, really. So by all means, if you want me back on in the future, I'd happily come on. Thank you, gents.
No problem.
To have you on as always.
Yep.
Indeed. Well, guys, I've got a table booked. I've got the wife sitting there waiting for me patiently. She's trying to hold a table. So I'm going to head up there. Believe it or not, Gran Canaria go mad for Valentine's Day. I don't get it, but never mind. The bloody restaurant's mobbed. So I'm going to head up there just now, guys. Thank you very much. Next week, we're back to our normal time of 7 o'clock. So go ahead, like, subscribe, tell your pals, hit that notification bell to get alerted of any new shows at all. You maybe happen to see me lying in a swimming pool somewhere. You never know. Not before next week, but guys, thanks very much. Good night.
Enjoy your holiday, Cammy.
Cheers, mate.